glad that you're here again. For one more time, let your madness run with mine. Steely Dan, the musical equivalent of a vodka highball with a cannabis sativa chaser. For decades now, the duo featuring singer-songwriters Donald Fagen and Walter Becker has created elegant jazz-tinged pop with a hint of smooth R&B, showcasing lyrics so cryptic fans have made a career out of trying to decipher what these guys are actually saying. The lyrics recited at the top of this video are from a Steely Dan tune entitled Midnite Cruiser from the group's 1972 debut album Can't Buy a Thrill. It's a unique track for several reasons, not the least of which is that longtime Steely Dan vocalist and songwriter Donald Fagen doesn't sing it. Rather, Midnite Cruiser is sung by founding Steely Dan drummer Jim Hodder. Yet despite the fact that Fagen doesn't sing the tune, I believe Midnite Cruiser ranks among his most revealing and nakedly personal songs. So, just what is Midnite Cruiser about? In an attempt to answer that question, I performed a web search to get a feel for how fans interpret the song, and the results I found are interesting. One fan writes that the song is about passing your prime without accomplishing anything, while another speculates the track is about, quote-unquote, cruising around for street-walking prostitutes late at night. A YouTuber who will remain nameless believes Midnite Cruiser is about a man who finds himself, quote, in a hopeless situation, but he doesn't want to escape it, instead choosing to embrace the situation and fade off into oblivion. All valid theories. This being Steely Dan, rock's official kings of the abstruse. Anybody's guess is as good as the next. But I would argue that these hypotheses lack granularity, the sort of detail that serves to support the theories. So, in the interest of uncovering the meaning of Midnite Cruiser, I'm going to take a stab at supplying that line-by-line detail. You see, I believe there's a pun lurking within Midnite Cruiser that helps clarify the song and makes its meaning eminently more comprehensible. I'm talking about a play on a word that speaks volumes about Donald Fagen and foretells he and Steely Dan's eventual plunge into jazz pop. In this third long-form edition of Digital Graffiti, Midnite Cruiser, Donald Fagen's musical fantasy. It's been hailed as Steely Dan's masterpiece, the duo's undisputed magnum opus. Indeed, the group's 1977 album Asia is a flawless gem of a recording, centered around the album's sprawling 8-minute title track. In interviews, Donald Fagen has said the song was inspired by the wife of a distant friend married to a Korean woman named Asia. But I'm skeptical about Fagen's story, and permit me to explain why. Let's examine Asia's opening verse and chorus. Up on the hill, people never stare. They just don't care. Chinese music under banyan trees. Here at the Dude Ranch, above the sea. Asia. When all my time dancing is through, I run to you. That, to me, doesn't sound like an ode to a woman, but rather an ode to a vacation destination. To quote, people never stare, they just don't care. Here is Fagen rhapsodizing about a place outside of America he can retreat to when he gets a break from his high-pressure, dime-dancing lifestyle. A place where strangers don't approach him in starstruck awe.
Oh my God, you're Steely Dan!
If I had to wager, I'd say that Asia is about Indonesia, judging from the scarf draped around the neck of the woman on the album's cover, which matches the design and the color scheme of the Indonesian flag. So, I mention Asia because it illustrates one of Fagen's favorite pastimes, which is muddying the waters, throwing fans off the scent. As I stated previously, I'm skeptical of the yarn about him having a friend with a wife named Asia, as well as the song song's AJA spelling, because the evidence indicates the song is actually about Asia, the continent. It all seems like Fagan pulling our leg. So you're probably wondering, what does all this have to do with Midnite Cruiser? Well, just as many folks misinterpret Asia's true meaning due to a misspelling, so too does Midnite Cruiser hinge on stylized words. As I stated at the top of this video, the song's opening verse features a pun that I believe unlocks the track's true meaning. Let's review part of that verse once more. Thelonious, my old friend, step on in and let me shake your hand. The pun in question is the name that opens the verse, Thelonious. I believe this is a play on the name Thelonious, as in Thelonious Monk, the pioneering bebop-era pianist and composer. To support my theory, I direct you to the very title of Midnite Cruiser. Of all the songs in the Thelonious Monk canon, his most famous composition by far is entitled Round Midnight, a tune that holds the distinction of being the most recorded jazz standard in history. It's a tune so popular it earned Monk a posthumous Pulitzer Prize some 24 years after his death. And just as Fagan changed the spelling of Asia to great success, so does Midnite Cruiser stylize the spellings of Thelonious and Midnight. So now, with all this in mind, let's revisit the new paraphrased opening verse to Midnite Cruiser. Thelonious, my old friend, step on in and let me shake your hand. This is Fagan putting Round Midnight on the turntable and bonding with his hero. The singer is imagining a chummy connection with Thelonious Monk that's so deep he fantasizes that he can take nicknaming liberties with the pianist. Indeed, he equates listening to Round Midnight to actually taking an imaginary drive with his musical hero. Now, moving on to the next line of the song. So glad that you're here again. For one more time, let your madness run with mine. Here we see that listening to Monk's recordings is something of a ritual for Fagan, as evidenced by the line, so glad that you're here again. This notion is underscored in the next line, for one more time, let your madness run with mine. So here, we're offered a clue as to why Fagan feels so bonded to Monk. Like many geniuses, Thelonious Monk was an eccentric. His piano style was at times disconcertingly clunky and awkward. He frequently showed up late for gigs, had a custom of wearing odd headgear, and would often rise from his piano bench to dance when bandmates took a solo. It got to the point where Monk's quirks inspired the nickname Mad Monk. He was eventually diagnosed with manic depression, a mental illness now referred to as bipolar disorder. Taking all this into account, we can see that Donald Fagan somehow identifies with Monk and his foibles, hence the lyrical line, let your madness run with mine. If you've ever examined Steely Dan's lyrics, you know the group shares Monk's quote-unquote mad propensity for abstract song titles and esoteric musical compositions. Now, continuing on with the lyrics to Midnite Cruiser, we reach the song's pre-chorus. Streets still unseen, we'll find somehow. No time is better than now. I believe this line is a reference to the truth-seeking majesty of Monk's music and bebop in general. The post-swing jazz music scene of the mid-1900s was all about exploration. The atomic bop of Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, the cool jazz of Miles Davis and Chet Baker, the hard bop of Art Blakey, Cannonball Adderley, and yes, Thelonious Monk. These and countless other post-war jazz composers explored dissonance and chromaticism in a manner like never before, allowing fans like Fagan to discover musical streets that were, at the time, still unseen. So, up to this point, Midnite Cruiser is rather warm, affectionate even. But as we arrive at the chorus, the track suddenly takes on a conspicuously woe-begone feel as questions begin to cloud Fagan's early morning record listening experience. Tell me, where are you driving, Midnite Cruiser? Where is your bounty of fortune and fame? I am another gentleman loser. Drive me to Harlem or somewhere the same. The Midnite Cruiser in question, the man driving this exquisite listening experience, is of course Thelonious Monk. The next line, "Where is your bounty of fortune and fame?" This is likely a reference to the obscurity Monk toiled in for years before the jazz establishment finally caught up with his ham-fisted piano style and fractured hard bop songs. Next line, "I am another gentleman loser." Here we have Fagen lost in his 1950s barfly fantasies, viewing himself as a sort of luckless, antisocial peer of the hapless Monk. Next, we arrive at the line, "Drive me to Harlem, or somewhere the same." I believe this is Fagen celebrating the transporting power of bebop. Music so powerful, listening to it virtually carries us to the modern jazz capital of the world, Harlem. This is the singer imploring Monk to drive him to the black side of town, where the jazz clubs are, be it Gaslight Square in St. Louis, 12th Street in Kansas City, Central Avenue in Los Angeles, Hastings Street in Detroit, or any number of African American districts similar to Harlem that hosted jazz sessions in the mid-1900s. These are the places and the times and the music that beguiled Fagen in his youth and beyond. In a 2006 New York Magazine interview, Fagen confessed, quote, "I was a kid jazz fan. I only liked 7 or 8 of the greatest artists: Sonny Rollins, Charles Mingus, Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk." Donald Fagen was just 23 years old when he recorded Midnite Cruiser, yet he was already an old soul. That is, a man mature beyond his years, a guy largely out of step with his time. Perhaps nowhere is that more evident than on Midnite Cruiser's heartbreaking second verse, where virtually every line is saturated in sadness. Here, Fagen speaks as if he and Monk are relics of the bebop era, being cast off like so much garbage. This final verse serves as a lament to a bygone time, that magical post-war period when dapper jazz musicians stayed up all night pushing the limits of jazz harmony in the nation's nightclubs, dance halls, and Elks Lodges. The world that we used to know, you'll tell me it don't turn no more. Oh, the places we used to go. Familiar faces that ain't smiling like before. The time of our time has come and gone. I fear we've been waiting too long. The sentimentality for the post-war era will become a recurring theme in Fagen's music. From Midnite Cruiser onward, he will write about 1950s America, the world Fagen and Monk used to know, a world of radio and black and white television images offset by the atomic radiance from modern jazz. It's a time many boomers reminisce about, but just as Fagen communes with Thelonious Monk in the 1950s through the miracle of recording technology, so can we Steely Dan fans embark on a guided tour of the group's 1970s heyday by playing their recordings. And with each and every play, Donald Fagen's madness runs with ours. So now you've heard my take, now it's your turn. What does Midnite Cruiser mean to you? Let me know in the comments section below.